And then some of the local guys were like, hey, tonight we're going to be going under the bridge. And I was like, I don't know what that means, but I'll go there. And we went kind of under this huge overpass in the middle of Moscow where they had street ball courts, and they had about 10 street ball courts under this crazy overpass, graffiti everywhere, chain link fences. It was very kind of like Russia Rucker Park. Okay. Right, that's kind of the vibe, because I've been to Rucker Park. It's like it had that similar kind of feel where it was kind of a little grimier, a little kind of underground, and everybody there was just diehard street ball and dunk fans.
Hey there. Welcome to episode 16 of the Golf Never Sleeps podcast. My name is Ryan Robart. I'm a PGA of Canada golf coach. And on this podcast, I like to dissect and have some conversations, sometimes just my own thoughts or sometimes with others, around the topics of coaching and performance to help you play better golf on the golf course and also help you practice more effectively in your practice time. Today's episode is part one of my interview with Tyler Ray. Tyler Ray is a very unique person. Tyler Ray used to be, or I guess we'll still call him, a professional dunker, a basketball dunker. He had a very interesting career in athletics that led him to be a professional dunker, where he traveled the world. And we have a very interesting story about a trip to Russia that he had in 2012 and just how far dunking had taken him to the different parts of the world. This first part of the episode is more broken down into his background and his dunking career. Honestly, I think this can be a very fascinating portion of the episode or of the interview, because we break down a lot of his dunking background. Just gives us a really cool understanding of what it's like to be a professional dunker and some of the work that's involved in doing that. So I'll jump in a little bit at the end of the episode. So enjoy part one of my interview with Tyler Ray. Tyler Ray, a.k.a. Jump Guy Ty.
Jump Guy Ty.
Welcome to the Golf Never Sleeps podcast.
I love that I'm here, man. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for welcoming me into your beautiful space we have here. House / gym / office
/ coffee shop.
Coffee shop. Story for another story. Yes. For maybe the outtakes.
Yes.
I would really like to dive right into this. What does it take to become a professional dunker?
That's a great question. Unrelenting obsession,
okay.
Number one, which I think is the case with any commitment to any type of practice of any sort. Dunking is not something that, especially when I was doing it, is not something that is, it's not something that has represented itself quite well in the public eye. I mean, I found it through kind of the back streets of YouTube initially. I was a track and field athlete for the University of Windsor, volleyball athlete, and I just had a passion for jumping as high as possible. So I found these guys on YouTube that were jumping out the gym and at a different level and capacity than I had ever viewed in the past. And it became very evident to me that how I could jump was nowhere near the ceiling of potential that I possessed. So I just made it my kind of unrelenting quest to find out how high I could jump. So I think it started with just trying to find out like the maximum amount of human performance I could sustain in the jumping world, and then post a few videos, and it kind of just fell in my lap. If I'm being honest with you, I never set out to become a professional dunker. I was a teacher. I went through the kind of the common route of university and looking for a career, and I did this on the side. It was something that I did for fun, and I got reached out to by a gentleman from Florida who ran kind of at the time the only, we'll call, professional team, Team Flight Brothers, and wanted me to come down to Florida to do a show, a high school event, and flew me down, and I spent a week there and dunked for him a bunch of times on camera. And it turned out that I, at the time, was quite talented in terms of my jumping ability, but needed to work on like the finesse of dunking a basketball, right? I think a lot of people have seen dunking through the lens of the NBA.
Right.
And don't understand how difficult of a skill set it is when it comes to being 6 foot, small hands,
right,
and having to really jump to be able to dunk a basketball. So yeah, how did I become it? And it was just passion combined with circumstance, combined with a lot of failures, and never quitting.
So when was that first trip down to Florida to to hop in with or to meet the Flight Brothers?
2007.
Wow. Okay.
So it's quite a long time ago. I'm 39 now. I kind of retired from the professional dunk scene at about 30 years old. And it wasn't a choice that I made to be like, I'm just done and I had a great time. I suffered an injury that kind of removed me from the scene.
Right.
It was enough that the recovery and the risk of it happening again was greater than my desire to keep going. I'd done an immense amount of impressive and exciting things over the 8 years that I competed,
Right.
that I felt like I had kind of checked a box on my proverbial bucket list and I could move on to something else. So it was 2007 I started that trip, but I'd been probably training for jumping in some capacity specifically for probably 2 years prior to that, so around 2005. I competed for Windsor track 2003 through 2007. But the last couple of years of my track career, I was kind of more and more focused on just like finding out how high I could jump.
Right. So your time with the Windsor track team, what were we doing in track and field?
I was a multi-event athlete,
Okay.
so I competed in the pentathlon.
Okay.
Indoor, that's the 60-meter hurdles, long jump, shot put, high jump, and the 1,000-meter run, which is by
So
far
on
the
top of
worst
jumping, you also had the ability to run as well. You had some wheels on you as well.
I was quick for sure. I probably couldn't have competed individually in any sprint, but as a multi-event athlete, I was pretty fast. I think there's a lot of correlations between just explosive output and speed. So for me, being more of an elastic jumper, very quick off the ground, my speed was fairly good. Yeah.
So when you're talking going back 2005, 2006, 2007, social media wasn't really a thing at that time. And I think going back, I guess we're dating both of ourselves a little bit here, like YouTube wasn't even really a thing.
It was in its infancy for
Yeah,
sure.
it must have just been getting started.
I started on YouTube pretty much when YouTube started. I
Okay.
think it was about 6 to 8 months after it kind of became something that everybody was aware of,
Right.
is when I started posting my original videos on YouTube. And I can still look back. Part of me wanted to go back and unlist those videos because
Right.
I was kind of embarrassed by them. I've got videos of me in my backyard with the worst audio shot on a camera that looks like it might as well have been a toaster. Like there's not. I look back and go, I wouldn't watch it now. So I don't think YouTube prioritizes those videos anymore, to be honest with you. So I don't think we have anything to worry about. But I left them there because they are my roots, right? They are what got me kind of moving on this train of social media. At the time, I didn't really correlate I was doing social media.
Right, it wasn't looked at that way.
I was just posting videos to get more opportunities to be able to travel and do shows, right? Because with the professional dunk scene, you have to be reached out to by companies or businesses that are putting on events, halftime shows, things like that, and they want to contract your services. It's their short-term, one-time contracts.
Right.
And the more videos of me out there doing my thing, the more chance there was to be able to actually perform and make a little bit of money. It wasn't my full-time gig. When I say professional dunker, it's that I was paid to dunk in front of crowds and appearances and shows. I wasn't a full-time sustained income off of dunking. There are a few guys now that probably have enough of a full-time income solely based in dunking, but that was because a lot of us had made it a little bit more mainstream over the years.
And probably just the way to reach millions and millions of people. A lot of people can probably do it without leaving their home, whether it be
100%.
just doing things solely on social. So what's the biggest stadium? What's the biggest show you've done? Like, give me a little bit of a scope. So you said like NBA halftime shows. So like Lakers Bulls in the 2000s of the NBA Finals, you're in the halftime show.
I can't remember the exact date. It's long enough ago. Did an Orlando Magic halftime, which was pretty cool. I did an event over in Russia, which stands out to me as probably the most notable, memorable moment.
Can we maybe just quickly timestamp what year this trip to Russia was?
2012.
Okay.
Getting there then was also very hard, and also something that
yeah.
at the time I was like, well, yeah, I want to get the trip in, obviously another bucket list.
Right.
It's not too often that you say, like, I'm just going to head to Russia for a little bit.
So how did that come about? Who reached out?
It was a company that put on the World 3-on-3 basketball championship. So like over in Europe, 3-on-3 basketball is its own sport.
Okay.
So they have dedicated half-court stadiums built for 3-on-3 basketball, and it's intense basketball. If anybody's played 3-on-3 half-court, it's fast-moving. There's lots of turnovers, and it's very physical. So we got called over. There's 12 of us that were called over to compete in the dunk contest that was part of this event. And at the time, 12 of us were considered 12 of the better dunkers in the world.
Right.
So we were flown over and put up and paid and kind of given the royal treatment. But getting there in the procedures of getting the visa and getting everything was intense. I mean,
because obviously you were going there for work as well, right? It wasn't as simple as, hi, I'm just going to visit. Okay,
correct.
Great.
So I mean, 2 or 3 trips to Toronto to the embassy and a lot of red tape.
Right.
It was well worth it. It was only a 4-day trip, which was crazy to fly in, spend like an 18-hour day of traveling to get there, to be jet lagged, to compete, to then basically go home.
Thanks for coming.
It was pretty intense, but it was an immensely notable experience. The stadium there sat about 8,000 to 10,000, and it was the first time at that moment that I'd ever competed with like crane cameras and jumbotrons. At this point, this was like kind of pre, halftime shows and things like that.
Yeah, pre-extravaganzas.
So this was like the first time I'd walked out and there were a lot of people watching, and they had like a highlight reel tape playing of me on the jumbotron, which is crazy to think that some of these people knew who I was.
Yeah.
At that point, I still had no idea.
Right.
I really had I was like, I just post videos on my computer and I go to the park.
Yeah.
Go to the gym.
Park guy.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So one of my questions in doing my research, I had read about this trip to Russia, and one of my questions was, what's the craziest place Duncan has taken you? And I was actually hoping that maybe you for a microsecond had forgotten about that and told me another one so I could lead in. But I'm assuming that was
There's a crazy
craziest.
specific place. So the contest wasn't the craziest place in Russia. The craziest place was the day after the competition. Actually, it was the night of the competition. So we were there afternoon of the first day, which was spent basically checking in. We were in Moscow at the Coliseum, the athlete village there, which is the same place all the athletes stayed in the Moscow Olympics, which is really, really cool.
Yeah.
So we had that night to kind of acclimatize, basically just fall asleep, and then wake up and get ready to compete, which was incredibly difficult. I kind of underestimated how hard it would be with the jet lag, and I was a little bit sick as well, so that kind of amplified itself.
Right.
Got in, competed. I didn't have a great showing. I kind of finished middle of the pack, but at the end of the day, it was a cool experience. And then some of the local guys were like, hey, tonight we're going to be going under the bridge. And I was like, I don't know what that means, but I'll go there. And we went kind of under this huge overpass in the middle of Moscow where they had street ball courts, and they had about 10 street ball courts under this crazy overpass. Graffiti everywhere, chain link fences. It was very kind of like Russia Rucker Park. Right, that's kind of the vibe, because I've been to Rucker Park. It's like it had that similar kind of feel where it was kind of a little grimier, a little kind of underground, and everybody there was just diehard street ball and dunk fans. So dunking there was like mind blowing. It was such a surreal experience to be like, I'm under a bridge dunking in Russia. So that's probably the craziest place I've ever had the opportunity to show out.
Hey, I hope you're enjoying this podcast episode. If you are, I have a favor to ask. If you're watching on YouTube, please make sure that you subscribe to this channel, like this video, and make sure you hit that bell to make sure you get notified on when a new episode drops. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcasts, please make sure you subscribe there as well. But if you could leave me a rating, wherever you're listening or watching, if you do those things for me, it really helps the podcast grow and also motivates me to put out more content. And as always, on any platform, if you ever have any questions, please reach out. Let me know. I answered every comment. Now let's get you back to your episode. It's a really cool story. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah. So it was, so you've been to Rucker Park as well?
Yeah. One time. Didn't actually get to dunk there.
Okay, because I was going to say.
No, that was one of those bucket list places that I kind of wished I was able to do an event. And there were events there, but by the time I'd made it out there, it was like I was kind of fizzling out of my career.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right. What was the purpose of the trip there? Was it just let's be in the area?
I was just in the area for another event. Yeah, I managed to kind of swing by and check it out, just to kind of feel the vibes of it. And I didn't have any gear with me, so I wasn't able to kit out and go in and actually play or try to dunk. At that point, I probably I'd need like a 40-minute warm up probably. So those guys would be like, "Who is this guy?" he's been stretching a long time. And that's the one thing I don't think people realize is like, I wasn't able to just like a lot of these, 6'7", 6'8" guys that can jump, just walk out and just dunk at will. So people meet me and they go like, oh wow, you jump really high, just jump for me. I was like, I'm not a clown, first of all. Second of all, like there's a process of warming up. I mean, when I would go practice, the first like 10, 15 minutes of the practice, I'm like slowly jumping. I'm starting to get the kind of intricacies of the neuromuscular system working, and so that I don't blow out my knees or my back, which is kind of what eventually happened with my back. But yeah, take your time, warm up a little bit. And, I don't know if my body was necessarily built for jumping. I kind of just made it work.
Right. Dunking looks very cool, and jumping also looks very cool as well. But I'm assuming, I'm probably saying something pretty obvious here, that's got to be very hard on the body.
Incredibly hard.
Like landing from that height is very high, or very hard on the body.
You hit the nail on the head with that one for sure.
You referenced a little bit the warm-up it took. Can you give me like a little bit of context when you were training or when you were actively competing or in your professional dunker kind of prime, what did training look like? How many days a week? How long? What is a training session? How many times were you jumping? How many times were you dunking?
It would depend largely on the time of year, whether we were kind of like in the competitive season where I know I was going to get called for more shows or events. So I would taper training a little bit more for those moments. I initially started off by kind of just training similar to the way I trained for track. Which was, you'd have a kind of a foundational phase of training where you're doing a lot more lifting to try to build that capacity, and then you are tapering volume and frequency to be able to be as explosive and kind of neurological as you could possibly be for that moment to jump once. It changed a little bit with dunking because I was jumping more frequently. So a high frequency, low volume approach is kind of the way I took, where I would jump twice a week, one session, somewhere between an hour and a half and 2 hours, where there'd be a good lengthy warm up, progressive loading of intensity of jumps to getting about 30 to 50 full jumps in a session, and then kind of winding down. I would do that on a 10-foot rim once a week. And then I would do a low rim dunking session once a week, where I would find a rim that was either 8 feet, 7.5, 8.5, somewhere in that range, where I didn't really have to jump to be able to dunk, but I could work on ball control. Because what a lot of people don't realize is with dunking, jumping is only a part of the equation.
Right, it's only halfway there.
Manipulating the ball and being able to finish a dunk, and your proprioceptive awareness, spatial awareness becomes incredibly important to be able to finishing things that, when in dunking, you'll throw something called a lob, which is basically you throw the ball, you're chasing it off the bounce, you're catching it, you're doing something with it, and you're finishing it. If you throw a kind of a rogue lob, and you're in the air or jumping kind of off kilter, having more of that kind of intrinsic compass allows you to be able to finish. That was kind of what my strength was. I could finish a lot of dunks that a lot of people would have bailed on, and they made for some of the coolest highlights ever because you're just chasing things that have no right to be chased.
Right.
So training 10 foot once a week, low rim once a week, jumping, and then I would lift 2 times a week, we'll call it in competitive season, and then up to 4 times a week when I was a little bit more sparse with events and things of that nature. So there would be some traditional lifting. I did, probably a mass majority of my lifts were unilateral, so single limb movements. It's probably the one thing I would tell people is spend more time on one leg. Because jumping, even though I'm jumping off of 2 feet, it's 2 independent contacts. It's right then left. It's not just jump, land on 2 feet, and jump again. It's not a pogo hop.
Right.
So being able to control and manipulate each individual foot is incredibly important. Feeling pressure in each foot change and where your body is in relation to that is very helpful. So that's kind of what it existed of. I think nutrition was the key that I found out a little bit later. I like to eat. Funny enough. So
likewise.
So my dunk show name was Jukebox.
Okay.
For those that might be listening that have no idea what a jukebox is, right? You put money into it, you request a song, and you get a song. My friend used to say, going to play basketball, you always turned into you dunking, and it was like people just requested dunks and you did them. You're like a dunk jukebox. Right. And I thought that was the coolest name, right? It wasn't the traditional like Air Tyler or like Air Canada.
Right.
Like, those air, like that flight, that has been done.
Yeah, it belongs to Air Jordan.
So I was jukebox, and it was like I was the dunk jukebox, which was pretty cool. So, yeah, it's just great experience overall. Training wise, I can't train like that anymore.
Right.
But I do miss the kind of grind of that, week on week and getting that high in the air. That's pretty addictive.
So you touched on something that I think very few people will consider. Dunking, there's two main skills.
Correct.
You have to get high enough, right? You got to take care of the jumping part. But then you got to get the ball to do what you want to do.
You got to dunk it.
And you got to dunk it.
Yeah.
What does a training session look like on low rim where the only thing you're trying to do is the ridiculous things we see online? That golf ball. That
I also golf. Just some clarification. This is probably super random that he's interviewing a dunker, but I also golf. Not super well, but I golf.
Yeah.
Continue.
What does a training session look like to get the basketball to move the way it does, at the speed it does? And if you were the jukebox getting dunks to finish from no man's land, what does that training look like? Do you feel that you had some natural ability there to find the basketball in space, or was that something that was developed?
I've been obsessed with dunking since I've been a kid. You can ask my dad. I mean, the moment they were able to put a basketball net in, I wanted it down low. I wanted to be able to work on dunking, right? The original Michael Jordan documentaries and just growing up seeing him. Vince Carter was a huge inspiration in the early 2000s. Obviously, the infamous dunk contest that he exploded the world. That was another fire. My ability to move the ball through the air was a combination of having done it a lot over the years. And also, like you're saying, those low rim practices became something that they had to happen. So it would be as much as a lot of missing. First of all, there's a lot of misses. There's an old news clip, and someone asked me that question on camera, and they said, like, how do you get so good at dunking? And I said, you got to miss a lot to make a lot. You have to be okay with going in a session, you have 75% of the attempts don't go in. That's what people don't see. When they see you do a one-handed dunk and it looks effortless, they don't see the other 50, 100, 300 attempts where you're in the wrong angle, or you finish a little bit with your hand flat versus finishing it steeper. So there's a lot of reps that people don't see in there of missing. And that, I think, was those sessions, is just miss on miss on miss. And then you develop that feel, and it's that kind of just kinesthetic awareness of when the ball is like not directly in my hand, but it's off to the side of my pinky. I know that my first movement is going to be to just rotate my hand to cause that centripetal force not to continue the ball in that direction. And that's all I'm doing, is just stopping momentum and then finishing, because I finished a dunk tens of thousands of times. So that's why it became easier and easier over time. But those sessions, I loved those sessions. And to be fair, I still kind of do those sessions now, because I can't really put the impact into my body the way I used to. So my net goes down to like 6 feet, but I'll put it at 8 feet.
Right.
And I'll go in there and work out, and I'll just hop and move the ball around. I can still put the ball around my back and under my legs. And it's just, it becomes part of who you are.
That's a fascinating answer. That was a really good answer. And just, you're talking about when the basketball hits your pinky finger, as opposed to when you hope that it lands in the palm of your hand. So that was part one of my interview with Tyler Ray. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions or if you have any comments, please send me an email. You can always reach out. You can email me at golfneversleeps@gmail.com. Make sure you tune in next Tuesday for part two of my interview with Tyler Ray. We're going to get into a little bit more of the coaching side, and I think we'll be able to connect some dots into some of the things that he has to say and some insights we talk about and how it can help you on the golf course. So have a great week. We'll catch you next Tuesday.